please, you know, be kind and let them say what it is that they'd like to express. No negative comments, please, or cheap shots at anybody. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and we believe it can be valuable to all of us. Remember, this is a civil discourse, so let's keep it that way so we can all learn. I'll be bringing the microphone around. I will be on the floor in a minute, and I will take your questions, or there are volunteers here who are very kind, and they will take written questions if you would prefer to do it that way. We're happy to accommodate you. So we're going to talk about what's going on in our community, what do we value, what can we do, and what are we willing to do. So without any further ado, I will ask Joy Brown to come to the podium. And then she will introduce herself and our other panelists.
What's up, neighbors? First off, thank you to the library. This is my keychain, and it has my very busted up Huntington Library card on it. Panelists, come up. Let's roll. The library's closing at 9, so what I'm going to do is sort of truncate some introductions here, faster, so that we can get to you, because this is supposed to be your conversation. Natalie's on the end. Natalie is with Dowling College. Eric is in the middle. Eric is with Vision Long Island. And we just watched Ron's movie. Right? I'm supposed to let you all introduce yourselves, and I'm not going to. What I want to do is, as you answer your question, what you're going to do is you're going to give a little bit about yourself, because if the library is closing at 9, I truly do want to get the audience into this now. So what's on your mind? What is on your mind? Somebody raise a hand up, somehow indicate you've just seen something that tells you that as a suburbanite you're very powerful. I'm not sure that we realize that enough. I think that you just saw something that tells you that a suburbanite is in the midst of profound change, probably maybe even more profound than when that settler generation that came out here after World War II came. So there's got to be a lot of things going on in your mind, so let's talk about it. Yes?
I'm just interested in knowing why Mr. Roditis, what prompted you to make the film?
Okay, well, by way of introduction, thank you. Yeah, I am a television producer and a documentary filmmaker by trade. So what I usually say anytime we do a screening for any film is that I don't pretend to be an expert on the subject matter. That would be actually a great disservice to the actual experts, many of whom are in the film, and my esteemed colleagues on the panel with me. My interest is really, and I make the films for people like myself who want to learn more about it. And I had done a film called Farming the Future, which was on public television, and it was all about, subtitles Farm Life on Long Island, and it was about the challenges of farming in suburbia. And I started becoming very, very fascinated with suburban issues, and it really was my family story of, I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens, but a Long Islander most of my life. But I know, we're half Italian, so coming from our family, it was really, you had made it when you got to the suburbs. But I notice now, and over time, things have changed where our contemporaries are, for various reasons, some of which we go into, are moving, back to Brooklyn. So I was fascinated with that dynamic, and had done a number of different projects and television specials and programs on the subject of WLIW's Long Island, Smart Growth, Long Island's Future, one called Suburban Evolution, and ultimately led to this film.
I have a question that's bothering me. Long Island in general is trying to keep its youth on Long Island, and we don't provide them with places to live. Huntington in particular is most opposed to any affordable housing. And how do we solve this problem of not losing our young people to Atlanta or Virginia or any other suburb that they can afford to live in?
Just before you guys answer that question, can I just get a survey of hands? How many of you have children or grandchildren who have left Long Island and don't tend to come back? All right. So we're going to die old, alone. My kid just left, I feel it. Who wants to go first?
I can go if you want me to. I'm Natalia Rogers, and I'm a director of American Communities Institute, and it's a field of my research. So I have a couple of ideas. One of them is we have to create more jobs on Long Island for our young people. I don't know if you're aware that there is no growth in jobs whatsoever between 2000 and 2010. There was only a growth of 5,000 according to statistics. Second, we have to create the type of jobs that will pay them well and they can afford to live here. Of course, we want to have more affordable housing and more transportation, but most critically, we have to attempt to educate all the variety of populations that we have. You know, we have inequality. So the more highly educated people we have, and the better we have, you know, the better ability we have to attract jobs, more young people will stay here. As a college professor, I can tell you, because my students, they would love to stay on Long Island. They love Long Island. But when they come out of school of education, there's no jobs, so they go someplace else.
Yeah, there's also no housing. Eric, you want to?
Sure. I mean, Eric Alexander, Executive Director of Vision Long Island. We're a smart growth planning organization that helps revitalize downtowns and brings infrastructure dollars to our downtowns, and we lobby state and federal government for those resources. I guess to answer directly the question, it's really a town-by-town, village-by-village effort, and there are over 30 villages that are actively changing their zoning codes to allow this housing. 6,300 transit-oriented development units of housing near our train stations, obviously, that have been built over the last 6 years. So some of this is happening. There's another 4,000 units with live applications in the hopper. There's another 10,000 units envisioned that could become real if there are community-based efforts and people supporting this. But it's really on Long Island, and I think that's where I got a little confused in the movie. It's not a generic suburban regional thing. What we find out here you know, what people want to do in Rockville Center may be different than Westbury, maybe different than Jamesport, maybe different than Riverhead. We are an island of a lot of different communities. There are folks in Dix Hills who are never going to want this type of, you know, mixed-use development or housing, and that's okay. The reality is to embrace the places that want the change, and the market will drive that. Young people will go there. In fact, young people, a lot of people are going to Queens and Brooklyn, unfortunately. They're not staying here. But we're actively creating those places now so that in the next 5 or 10 years, we can see the change.
Can you tell us 3 communities where they are doing that kind of?
Sure. Westbury, Farmingdale, Patchogue. And I could give you, another 20.
So you're going to talk to him after. I'll text your kids.
Dr. Rogers, with all due respect, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, during the Clinton administration, when there was a federal surplus, young people were leaving Long Island at that time. I believe it has more to do with the cost of living on Long Island.
That's correct. But when you think about that employers are moving out of suburbia or specific, high-cost suburbia, what it does, it increases your taxes because your public schools are partially supported from the taxation of small businesses and other employers. And that's a vicious circle because you are short on tax revenues and your taxes rise. And so that's how that cycle happens. So having ability to have good employers and jobs critically contributes to high quality of living, but also not rise in taxes, so young people can afford to stay here.
Yeah, hi. I just want to know, I think there's an emerging theme here about young people because, I think demographics, is really what's going to change. We have a younger demographic able to move into Long Island, creates a dynamic community, a diverse community. But I want to know, is there any research into what young people actually want, you know, out of suburban life. I know that older folks like me, I have 2 children who are in college, one to graduate school. You know, we are car-centric. We are, you know, kind of bound to the routines almost of our parents. Maybe we're kind of transitionary. But I'm not so sure I see that in the younger people.
That's right.
So I'm wondering, like you say, you're moving them, they're going to Brooklyn, they're going to Queens. There was a segment in the film where, I think it was in Virginia, where they said that, hey, my daughter has everything she needs here. You know, she doesn't need to go, she doesn't need a bus, and she doesn't need a car. So what is it that young people want? Thank you.
I can tell you that we don't exactly have research that would pinpoint this. This would be a good research question to study and to look at. But however, there is a variation between different suburbs surrounding New York City. And what we're measuring is that Long Island lost between 2000 and 2010, 12% of its population between 25 and 34. If you go to northern New Jersey, adjacent to New York City, that loss is only 6%. Now, overall, New York City grew 3% in terms of population between 25 and 34. However, people who stay on Long Island, when you ask, you know, it's Long Island Index, which is, they do great work. 83% of people who reside on Long Island love their communities. And that includes young people. So it would be interesting for me to do this kind of research and to ask them.
There are different polls, though, that are out there and different surveys that show upwards of 50% of young people do want to live in downtown centers. So that's a consistent number. It goes as high as 60 and 70% in some surveys. Also, this generation coming up, this Generation Y or millennials, or whatever they're called, is least likely to want to own a car or have a car due to economic necessity or desire. They're more into technology. They'd rather have an iPad and be able to get in a zip car or get onto a subway or a bus or a train or walk or bike than be a car guy or gal, right? So that's the other piece of the equation. And then as far as home ownership, it is a group that is least likely to want to own a home like their parents did. Not to say that as they age, that those numbers will creep up, but right now we see numbers of 80+% of young people in the 18 to 35 age range that don't want to have, you know, their goal immediately is not to have a single family home in the suburbs. So there are different trends and surveys that are out there, and you know, we can talk a lot more about it, but let's hear more from you.
And while we're waiting, my daughter's reasonings are pretty simple. One, not able to get a job that would pay enough money for her to live anywhere other than somebody's basement. Two, she's not living in anybody's basement. And three, if she didn't have a car, she was trapped. And we weren't going to buy her a car. So she's in the city now, and very happy, yes.
In contrast to the rest of the country, Long Island school districts are not divided by county. When I looked at Virginia, it was interesting. Those communities, it's the county of Fairfax. The schools, it's all one district. Long Island has separate school districts. Why, first question, why was it formulated that way at the beginning? And two, that's probably a big part of the problem in developing affordable housing because the interests are so narrow, restricted to the individual school districts. The contacts, the social contacts have kind of insulated one community from another. Why did Long Island school districts divide themselves that way? I think that's a big factor in one of the problems on the island.
Anybody want to take that one? Because if you don't, I will.
I know. You go, Joy. We will be after you.
Historically, if you think about Long Island, and I've always said that Long Island is a community of communities, the main thing here is that people want to control their own destiny. That's why we have not just school districts, but villages, and we've had 2 more villages, one created in Nassau and one created in Suffolk within the past 3 years. People very, very much want to have that kind of control. I happen to have grown up in Washington. I have nephews that went to the Fairfax County School District and to the Montgomery County School District. They will tell you that it is onerous and terrible and horrible and nobody pays any attention to them and the principal won't call them back. And frankly, they envy me when I say I give a phone call and before the phone's down, it's ringing, the guy's calling me back. So the answer to your question is that historically, as Long Island developed, it developed as a community of communities where people wanted to extend and keep local control. And the good part about that is that you have some excellent school districts that are able to maintain that excellence. The bad part about that is that you also have some pretty crappy school districts that can't get out of it being anything other than what they are. And the other part of that is that in schools, nobody wants to lose something that they have nobody wants to give anything up. That's where we're stuck.
I just want to follow up the question I asked. Huntington, the village, is probably the most viable and vibrant town in all of Suffolk County. You can't get parking on a Saturday night. We have the Huntington train station, which is the hub of the Long Island Railroad. We have plenty of vacant land.
Right.
We have no housing of affordable nature for rental purposes that is presently not met significant opposition, and I don't quite understand. I don't care what's going on in the rest of the United States and suburbia. I'm concerned about what's going on in Huntington, in the town of Huntington, and we seem to be running away from a solution that is staring us right in our face.
Let me take that head on. There are communities that don't want change. Again, I don't know if this is a regional conversation or this is a Huntington conversation, I guess, so let's drive into it. I won't talk about other areas around Long Island. In Huntington, there are folks, our organization used to be Vision Huntington, and there was some openness for apartments over stores in downtown Huntington, and there's been about 40 units that have been approved over the last, it's been a small amount. The discussions in Huntington Station got 10 years ago, got so far flung, where you're talking about 800, 1,000 units, 1,500 units, people are writing study after study, report after report. And when there's a breakdown in trust between the citizens, the business owners, and your local government, you can't move. And where we've seen success is where villages, and the village government, this is where I almost challenged folks who are saying, oh, these school districts, we got a problem. Sometimes when you have small levels of government, you can build up trust. Over the course of a month, 2 months, 3 months, you can have a planning process, you can put in applications forward, and people understand the impacts, they understand the benefits, and you can come to a conclusion. What happens in Huntington is it's an ongoing fight between the affordable housing activists, people who don't want it, and a bunch of chaos and misinformation in between. And unfortunately, if it weren't for groups like Leadership Huntington and others in these kinds of conversations, you wouldn't get past that. And the Avalon Bay, I'll just throw that in because it was in the movie, is another example of outside forces telling local communities what to do. And an organization, look, we supported Avalon Bay. We thought it was a good project. But the process was so brutal in a community attacking each other, or outside folks attacking local communities and them fighting back, a lot of confusion. You know, it doesn't help.
I think that sign is still up, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Avalon, you know, so it's like, let's get past these kinds of wars and let's look at the solutions that work. And there are plenty of them on Long Island.
Eric, I'm going to sort of ask another question. We hear a lot about the people on the polar ends, those who want it and those who don't. How much do you hear from the rest of us who don't say much of anything, and how important or not important is that?
Oh, we hear a lot from them. And I think that's where, you know, and what they're saying is some of them want some of these changes, some of them don't. Their number one concern, as Dahlia said, economics, jobs, and you know, we're watching a movie that was more focused on the racial component of suburban change. But the economic and class-based aspects of suburban change are the biggest driver. And I think when those of us that are proposing changes on Long Island, when we frame it in an economic imperative, we're more successful than change for social justice sake, or for because it's the right thing, or because it's the cool thing, or it's a cool downtown, or blah, 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 blah. When you really boil it down to dollars and cents and the benefits for local communities, you know, you get a much better reaction. And I think we're hearing that. I mean, small business, I mean, maybe you want to drive into the small business study that you did. I mean, there's a lot, we're hearing from a lot of regular people that want to see some change. So that's why I got to struggle with the big message that says suburbia is fighting back the NIMBYs, and you know, there's going to be communities, Port Washington, Yaphank, a handful of them that are going to fight to the death, and they'll never make any changes. But downtown Huntington, we're just focused on housing. The Paramount Theater opened, and there's 6,000 people coming in each week for a world-class show. Yeah, so there are changes.
Here's the question.
Hi, Joyce. I want to follow up with that then, Huntington Village, where the luxurious town it is, and with Vaughn's description in the film, where he showed the mall where there were no stores open and everything was closing down. And then on September 29th, I was at the opening of the Microsoft stores in Huntington Village, and what an excitement that was when that store opened up and all the young kids came out enthusiastically supporting all of the technology, and I was overwhelmed with the excitement that was centered there. And now that the mall wants to expand into an upscale situation where they're going to expand on the second floor, inviting all luxurious stores to come in, and it's just a wonderful experience. And I for one am totally electrified by that whole process.
I am too. Anybody here? Any other questions? What's on your mind? What are you thinking about? Let's just go. Well, she's doing it, not Daisy.
I have a question, because you really showed in the film some of the success stories of regional planning. You know, those were really the one stories where communities really came together. In looking down in Long Island, you know, is there hope for that? Can Nassau County and Suffolk County get along, or can we work with New York City and really building the whole region to be the region that we all need? You know, to
that's a $1 million question right there. Questions. Well, first of all, it was fascinating in doing the film to go around the country and kind of see. You talk about regionalism, talking about things happening at the local level, and seeing efforts in Chicago and Metropolitan Planning Council, and the way some other areas are handling it. So I definitely wanted to include in the film some best practices. And that is not to say though that my colleagues here can speak to it a little bit more. That's not to say that it's necessarily one solution for one area is going to work for another exactly. Because as we said, at the Northeast, and particularly Long Island, we have Montgomery County, was able to deal with affordable housing and have really a successful model of integration. Well, they also don't have the fragmentation that we have in terms of, we have, talking about the government fragmentation. So there are certain regional problems and structural problems. As far as getting along, I mean, I'm going to throw that up. I don't know that I can answer that. But my hope is that, through the film, you see some other best practices and other ways that, even if it's not a specific solution, my feeling is in any film that you have to have a note of hope and show that, it's not all about the problems. That's why it's problems and promise. Because if people, the second you believe you can't do it, then you really can't. So I'm hoping that people will actually, get a little inspiration from it. Yeah.
Actually, if you read the most recent research, in some places the efforts for regional development are not so successful. So there's a debate now in the nation whether we should go and do the regional development. And we see the guy from Portland, Oregon, and they had a regional development and it broke down. They used to be the poster child for regional development. And then some of the municipalities exited from this because they felt that they were not treated equally in that regional development. So I want to be careful about praising that as a solution for everyone. It definitely might work in some places, but it doesn't work in some places where they introduced it. In addition to it, the latest trend in the nation, actually not regionalism, but a couple municipalities getting together and saving money on local school districts buying supplies together. So there's a trend to save money, but not necessarily through regionalism, just through cooperation.
I mean, I'll just add to this. Fragmentation is not necessarily always bad. When you have, if you've got 80 communities in Long Island with downtown business districts, if you can make 80 of them, excellent. And who cares whether it's a county that does it, a state government that does it. If it's a local village government that can drive that process, come to consensus, invest in dollars, and really make their main streets great, who cares the method? Let the community decide that. And that's what we found. The success, now I mentioned 6,300 units of housing were approved over the last 6 years. The prior 5 years, there were only 300 units approved, right? So there's been an exponential growth. Most of that growth has been in villages, right? So that's a small level of government. So someone says, oh, we got to get everybody to get along, we got to get the Nassau and Suffolk County. Nassau and Suffolk County, I don't think anyone would vote to have Nassau or Suffolk County control your land use. I would be, if I'm a betting man, I think that goes down in any referendum. So I don't know if I want I didn't elect, you know, I love Steve Malone. I didn't elect Steve Malone to do the zoning for the village of Northport where I live. You know, it's not, I don't see that happening.
Good question. No, an observation. I think part of I support Avalon Bay, I support all those kinds of developments. But I think there's a history in Huntington Station. People, when I grew up, I was born here. Huntington Station looked like Huntington Village. There were stores, there were apartments above stores, there was Fred the shoemaker, everybody knew everybody else. And then they knocked the whole thing down and built low-income housing and parking lots. So I think when people hear about developments like Avalon Bay, that's what they think is going to happen. They think it's going to be just a vast wasteland around, you know, the station.
Well, that's what, you know, we're working in the community of Hicksville. And, you know, what happened was it was government policies that destroyed Huntington Station, right? Same in downtown Hicksville. They lost half of their Main Street. They'll cross from the sweet shop, folks who know Hicksville, I grew up there, so. From the sweet shop, we still get great ice cream. Is completely ripped down. And the Department of Transportation ripped out that entire stretch of stores, and local government then rezones the old potato fields, which then became a mall in Island Plaza, and sucked the economic activity out of the downtown area. That has been a story that's happened again and again and again, right? So back to trust. You've got to trust that the new government change is going to be better than the old. And that takes work. And you know, there are those of us that believe certain policies can change for the better. But you got to work with undoing the damage, and it takes time.
Hi, I am one of the people who is not born in Huntington. I'm one of the younger people. I have a 4-year-old and I have a 9-year-old. I'm a professional, I'm a professor, my husband's a physician. And there's a few things that attracted us to Huntington, and that was that we saw the downtown area. We're really attracted to the downtown area. And a lot of our friends, when they come, they see it's a vibrant place. But also coming from the position from somebody who is minority, living north of 25A, it's very, very different than, I don't even think it's a Nassau-Suffolk conversation, I think it's a North Shore, South Shore conversation.
That's right.
Where what you see on the South Shore are younger families, and when I go visit my friends down on the South Shore in places like, you know, like Freeport or Massapequa, or, you know, just what we're seeing is, my husband and I look at each other and we say, well, why is it so different? Why can't we go down there and see neighborhoods, like real neighborhoods where, you know, the families are, you know, your next door neighbors, and they come over and the kids are playing in the street, and then I go to my area, I live in the Huntington Bay area, and it's older families, not one, we've lived there for about 3.5 years, nobody's come to visit us as far as I'm concerned. I feel as though they don't want us there, and so it's this sort of feeling of this juxtaposition between, you have Long Island, but it's not really, you don't feel like it's an island, you feel like it's two different countries.
Joy, can I take that one? Okay. That's one thing that, I think it's a great movie and a great film, but one thing that it does not address in depth is actually the growth of inequality in the suburbs. And that's one of the major stories that are occurring in the suburbs. And we see it unfolding in front of us. So maybe the North Shore, South Shore partially is the discussion about who can afford to live where. And that is also a conversation about age. American households on average during the recession between 2007 and 2009, the average income went down 2.6%. Now, in 18 months after the recession, the supposed recovery, The average income went down even further, 4.6%. But if you divide and look at which groups gained post-recession, there were people over 65, between 65 and 75, and 75 and 85. Everyone else lost in income on average. So it's sophisticated and complex, but I would say that this is a conversation about inequality in the suburbs that we need to have.
Well, the other thing that we want to get into is North Shore, South Shore. North Shore started out as estate lands where people tended to their own